particularly at a time, I think, on this campaign where we've got kind of two different views of masculinity. I mean, I think as women, perhaps, and I'm sure you've noticed that too, Jean, there's this kind of alpha retro view of masculinity that we're seeing from the Trump campaign. And then you've got Tim Walz and Doug Emhoff, who are both professional men, but are in sort of supportive roles of a woman who's the principal candidate. And how they are, and he said something very interesting. He said, look, you can't scold people. You can't tell them you should be more supportive of women and women candidates, and that's going to help everybody. But he hopes that by leading by example, by talking about the fact that he loves his wife, that you can make space for women to rise to the top, and it doesn't diminish your masculinity.
But, Jonathan, it's crazy to think that half of America is A-OK supportive of mass deportations. But what a lot of voters are leaning towards Trump on immigration is that he does talk about it every day. So the fact that she's now talking about it is a huge win. And not just going to the border, but talking to communities around the country that have had a huge influx of legal immigration. But those communities are economically strained, right? They are maxed out. And what she's starting to do now is talk to those communities. You know, when she talks immigration, not just talking about the dreamers, not just talking about the path to legal immigration, but to say to Americans, and right, nobody's eating cats and dogs in Springfield. Right. But there are lots of people in Springfield who are saying, my town looks different, my town feels different. We're stretched, our schools, our hospitals, and she's now starting to address that, which is a huge positive, because until now, Donald Trump touches a scintilla of truth, a scintilla, and then pushes it into a total lie zone. She's now getting into that space and seeing those people who potentially have felt like the government said, sit down, be quiet, and get used to the new world. And so she's now going there, and this could really be a good move for her.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. MSNBC is not having a good time right now dealing with the reality that their interview with Kamala Harris did not have the intended effect. First and foremost, she did an interview on MSNBC. Not exactly the audience that Kamala needs to be talking to in order to convince them to vote for her, because those people are already 100% brainwashed into voting for her, right? But she went on the network because there's a lot of criticism that she's getting for refusing to do interviews, running away from the media. And the interviews that she has done have been very friendly, okay? They have not been tough interviews, but she just can't seem to knock one out the park, right? She just cannot seem to knock a softball question out of the park, right? She is leaving a whole lot to be desired. And because of that, she's getting roasted after this MSNBC interview, which was supposed to be friendly territory for her. This was supposed to be her opportunity to shine.
Jessica, a majority of the country wants mass deportation. That's not controversial. And it's a vast majority of the country. You say that she wants tax cuts for the middle class. She's not proposing tax cuts. She's just proposing keeping the Trump tax cuts for the middle class. No one's going to get an additional tax cut under Kamala Harris. It just stays the same for those people. She says she wants to build homes. How's she going to do that? She build, 8 car charging stations? $7 trillion for 8 car charging stations. This woman can't build anything. The guy spent his whole life building something. I'd rather go with this guy. She says dreams, ambitions, opportunity, aspirations. These are the words that Obama's people told her to say, because she can't talk about her record. She can't talk in specifics about what she's going to do. She doesn't really know what she's going to do. She's just a basic woman from California who just ran through the machine all the way to the top. And now I feel bad for her. She's not ready for this. She's not ready for the job she has. She's not ready for the job she wants. We're not ready for her. She's not doing well. These interviews are going really poorly. She was asked a specific question about how are we going to make housing more affordable? And she says she's going to give money to state and local governments, and it's going to be holistic. What does that mean? She's going to build yoga studios, Jessica? Healing crystals?
You love yoga.
Ayahuasca studios? What does that mean? She's going to give money to state and local governments in a holistic way for transportation needs, that it's going to help housing. She doesn't have a grasp on anything. She didn't even know Biden kept Trump's tariffs on China. She says inflation's a crisis and then blamed Trump. She says the border is a crisis and then blamed Trump. She said the border was fine 3 years ago. She said the border was fine
She
for
said
3
there
years,
was a bipartisan
and now
border bill that
it's a
Donald Trump
crisis.
killed
She
for his
can't
own
blame
electoral
Trump for her
advantage.
border crisis. She let 20 million people into the country. And the worst line of the whole thing, Jessica, she said the American dream is dead. She's in power now. She said the American dream is dead.
Yeah, so that was a brutal takedown by Jesse Waters. And it's not just Jesse Waters who is roasting Kamala Harris for her lack of answers during this interview. You also have investors like Kevin O'Leary and others who have went on national television, and they're low-key roasting Kamala Harris as well, too, for this interview.
Well, the good news is Harris has started to put policy out there. She's starting to take some level of interview outside of celebrity interviews. And we've learned a little bit in the last 48 hours. I'll tell you what I've gleaned from it. Number one, she stopped advancing in the polls in the counties in the 7 battleground states. And so while she's done very well with the all sugar, no protein strategy of Kumbaya, which I don't blame her for because it brought her right to where she is today, she's got some hard work cut out for her to move men into the camp where she's done so well with women. Can't win without some of those men. And those men are concerned about the economy. They're the breadwinners in many of these homes, as are women. But they're still concerned about the cost of living in Michigan and Pennsylvania, everything else. She also taught us something that I knew from 2019, 2020. When she's forced to do an interview where there are follow-up questions, that's when the verbal soup comes out. And Trump has lots of problems, too. He sometimes runs on too long and he's bombastic. But she's got verbal soup, and that's an issue. And the more she does interviews with real reporters like you, Larry, and others, that's when verbal soup is her enemy.
I'd love to have her.
That's an issue.
I'd love to have her, but she wouldn't come on here. I mean, she even flunked the MSNBC poll interview. But Scott Besson, I mean, I think Trump, I'm not sure where Kevin O'Leary's going. We're going to give him a second chance on this. I don't think he did well on that first pass, Scott. I think Trump has been very specific. He was specific at the Economics Club of New York. You were there. I was there. Malpass was there sitting next to me. We were all sitting clustered together. He was very specific. Where was it? North Carolina, where he put out this new American industrialization plan with respect to lower tax. All he's saying is you got to produce in the United States. And don't be like John Deere. Don't think you're going to sneak off into Mexico in the dead of night and get a 15% tax rate. But if you stay here in the United States, we'll give you a 15% tax rate, which strikes me as very sensible. What do you think, Scott? I mean, I think Trump has been incredibly specific and detailed about his economic growth plans.
Look, Larry, you're exactly right. President Trump, we know exactly where he stands. The only thing that I agreed with that Vice President Harris said yesterday is we have 2 fundamentally different choices for the way our economy is going to go. And, you know, today is day 1,344 of Kamala Harris being in office, and everything that I've heard in the past days and weeks is there are no new ideas. There's some new spending, but it's all the same. It's bigger government. It's more subsidies. It's exactly what gave us the big inflation in 21, 22, 23 that persist into 24. Larry, everything she is talking about is inflationary. You know, it is clear, you know, she is incoherent when she talks about economics. And I don't want to be accused of being a misogynist, so I will say Governor Walz is worse. But they clearly have no idea what they're talking about. They've got the same team that did this to the American public for the past 1,344 days. And it's the same policies. She is trying to convince us that she is a moderate, which is what Joe Biden did in 2020. He ran as a moderate, then went hard left, and we know that she is hard left. She's Bernie Sanders.
Let me go.
Bernie.
Yeah, I mean, she is Bernie Sanders, right? That's exactly who she is, okay? But what you're seeing here is that you have business people like Kevin O'Leary who's unimpressed, right? He's very unimpressed with Kamala. This interview that happened on MSNBC where these are the type of people she was supposed to be winning over, right? She's supposed to come out and to put out her economic plan, right? That was what this week was about, right? It was about the economy for Kamala. And that interview on MSNBC with Stephanie Ruhle was supposed to be her summarizing what she's going to do and answering those questions. But she left more questions than answers. And this is something that MSNBC is now pissed about, although Stephanie Ruhle initially after the interview admitted that, yeah, she didn't really answer the questions. But now all of a sudden, she's making excuses for why Kamala Harris did not answer the questions, because apparently MSNBC told her that, hey, you went off script. You're not supposed to say the quiet part out loud, which is that Kamala Harris bombed this interview. You're now supposed to pretend as if Kamala Harris shouldn't be held to any type of real standards. Take a look.
Talk about that answer. I do, but here's what's a little tricky. She doesn't answer the question around if the GOP is controlling the Senate, if she can't raise corporate taxes, where is she going to get the money from, to expand the child tax credit and do all the things she wants to do? And she says, we just have to do it. And that's great, and that's a campaign promise. But the issue is, if it means we're just going to borrow again, then what we're doing is we're just never addressing the deficit. And back in the days when you were a proud Republican, debts and deficits mattered.
2 days later.
Yeah, it was great because I was watching Fox News and I'm now excited about Melania's memoir. I'm going to have to pick that up this weekend, and I can get a silver coin that Donald Trump launched on Monday. Obviously, one of the 100 grand watches, and I haven't gotten my sneakers yet, but I'm sure they can tell me where to get them. No, that's nonsense. Obviously, for anybody who watched the interview I did with Vice President Harris, we sat down for 25 minutes and we talked about one single topic. The economy. It is the number one issue for voters. If Donald Trump would like to sit down and have that same conversation, I'm ready for you. And I think it's hugely important, and it's a vulnerability for both candidates. But it's really tricky, Joe, because, you obviously want to cover all of these topics, but to just do it with one candidate, it's hard because many people feel like she's speaking in platitudes. She's speaking about an economic vision, and she's not giving details. She's got an 80-page detailed policy proposal. And do I think that she answers every single question and gives people exactly what they want? She doesn't. Do you know why? Because she's a politician. And none of them do. They all speak in platitudes. But Donald Trump has given absolutely nothing except mass deportations, which would be a huge issue for our economy. And he just says, I delivered you the best economy ever, and I'm going to put across, blanket tariffs. But the thing that I think she needs to answer for more is, despite all of the economic wins over the last 4 years, despite the fact that Donald Trump emotionally connected with that blue-collar worker, but he didn't deliver for that blue-collar worker, she needs to solve for why he still polls better on economic issues with voters, because that, to me, is mind-boggling. When you talk to voters across the board, they often say, I don't know what any politicians do for me, but I did get my taxes lowered. And she made it clear. When the individual tax cuts expire next year, the one group of people who will get their taxes raised are people who make over $400,000 a year. Now, a lot of people in blue cities and blue states are wondering what happens to that state and local tax deduction. Donald Trump has now said, we're going to lift that cap. He's the one who put it on. We don't yet know what she's going to do.
Yeah. So again, that is massive cope, right? Massive cope. So Stephanie Ruhle was watching Fox News and she was like, damn, they are destroying Kamala Harris for not answering questions in my interview, right? Because it's not like Stephanie Ruhle really gave Kamala Harris a tough interview or tried to get answers out of her. She didn't answer anything, really. She gave us absolutely nothing. She didn't even hold Kamala Harris's feet to the fire when it comes to asking her whether or not she's going to extend the Trump tax cut. Because Kamala Harris is claiming that she's not going to raise taxes on the middle class, giving the same old tired talking point about, well, only people making more than $400,000 a year are going to have their taxes raised under us, under the Democrats, except you people are the same people that claim that Trump only lowered taxes on the rich, right? That the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act only benefited the rich, and you are against that. So does that mean that you are against the Trump tax cuts that actually benefited the middle class, right? Which they're set to expire. And if they do expire, and Democrats let them expire, right, if they're in power, then effectively they would be raising taxes on the middle class, right? Again, that was a question that Stephanie Ruhle should have asked Kamala Harris directly, but she didn't do that. And now Stephanie Ruhle wants to boo-hoo whine and cry about people feeling as if Kamala's not really answering questions. or that they're not getting answers from Kamala when you're going out of your way in an interview to avoid asking Kamala Harris direct questions about whether or not she's going to extend the Trump tax cuts, aka raise taxes on the middle class. Again, it's hilarious. It really is. It's absolutely hilarious because these same people claim to be so stunned and shocked that Trump is beating Kamala on the issues of the economy and illegal immigration because voters feel like, hey, well, I don't know enough about Kamala, right? But yet, when the media gets an opportunity to actually get the answers from Kamala, they just choose not to. And then they fume and get upset because voters feel like they don't have enough information. Well, the so-called journalists that are supposed to get the information out of the Democrats, out of Kamala Harris, if you weren't so piss poor at doing your job, then maybe you wouldn't have this problem, right? Maybe if you actually held Kamala's feet to the fire, maybe she wouldn't have this issue. Maybe voters would feel like, okay, I know what Kamala wants to do. So you can't blame the people who feel like Kamala Harris isn't answering questions when you guys are the ones that are allowing her to not answer the questions, right? Again, it's just funny. It's funny. These people really think that Democrats should not be held to any standards, right? It is unfair to hold Democrats to a standard. But they want to hold Republicans to the highest of standards, right? But Democrats, though, there should be no standards for Democrats, right? It's unfair to expect Kamala to actually answer questions. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. So what you're saying here is that this interview with MSNBC definitely did not move the needle, okay, at all. If anything, it might have backfired, okay, because people are saying, once again, okay, this woman's not answering the questions. Why is it that every interview that Kamala does, she's not giving us anything, okay? She's not saying anything, and she just sounds like she's in over her skis, especially when it comes to talking about the economy, right? If anything, it could be hurting her at this point, right? Because at some point, people are going to say, okay, well, I've heard enough, right? I'm voting for Trump, right? She's not giving us anything. I can't trust anything that this woman says. I think that's what's happening here, right? So they're mad, they're upset because the interview didn't do what they thought that it would do. And people are still very confused about what Kamala wants to do. And people are still roasting her over her word salad answers that she comes up with every single time she sits down for one of these interviews. So, hey, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.